How's it going, friends? Welcome to Lowry Hill, Minneapolis. This video is about to be the best video, the best resource on this topic. Let's get into it. How's it going, friends? My name is Jesse Lynch. I run the hardest working real estate team in the game. We're called To The Twin Cities, and you can check out our website, tothetwincities.com. But this YouTube channel, it's all about being a resource to you, helping you find a place to call home here in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. And relocations is what we do. It's what we do better than anybody else. It's what we spend all of our time thinking about and focusing on and solving problems for in kind of a weird, obsessive way. So if that is of any interest to you, then do me a favor, do yourself a favor, subscribe to the channel, click the bell to get notified so you can see all the videos we're putting out. Put out a ton of videos, and I'd like to think that we put out the deepest dives on what it's like living in the Twin Cities of literally anybody. We're trying to be the best resource anywhere on the internet about living in the Twin Cities greater metro area. And if you're interested in working with us, we'd love to help you. Go to our website, tothetwincities.com. We made it really easy. We've got a contact form there that you can fill out in like 30 seconds or less. And today we're talking about Lowry Hill. It's a very, very cool neighborhood. I'm excited to show you. Let's do it. Right now I'm standing at the very southwestern edge of the Lowry Hill neighborhood. And when I think about Lowry Hill, to me, it's very much just about sort of a level of walkability, both to kind of the happening stuff that's going on in Uptown and the natural beauty of the likes of Lake of the Isles. Specifically, Lake of the Isles is sort of next to or part of the Lowry Hill neighborhood. Basically, right behind the camera here is Lake of the Isles Parkway, and that's basically the edge of the Lowry Hill neighborhood and the start of Lake of the Isles and the park at Lake of the Isles. Lake of the Isles is part of the chain of lakes, which includes Cedar Lake, Lake of the Isles, Lake Harriet, and Bedamakoska. And it's just, to me, one of the most beautiful parts of all of the Twin Cities, certainly one of the most beautiful parts of Minneapolis. And I think it's genuinely one of the biggest assets to Minneapolis is that, with the exception of a small portion of Cedar Lake, almost all of these lakes in Minneapolis proper have public lake frontage, and they've created walking paths. I think they've created the first walking path around Lake Harriet in like the 19-teens or something like that, like forever ago. And there's been a long history of bikeability and walkability around those lakes. If you haven't watched the video yet, we have a whole video on the bike-friendly nature of the Twin Cities. So maybe I'll put a link up here for that. Yeah, it's a cool video. To me, it's almost impossible to beat the bikeability of the Twin Cities, and actually, statistically, that is true as well. Twin Cities ranks most bikeable over and over again around the entire country. But that's a different video, and today we're talking about Lowry Hill. And the border of Lowry Hill is basically, to the north, you have Franklin Avenue. To the east, you have Hennepin Avenue. To the south, you have I-94, basically. And then to the west, you have Kenwood Parkway, and basically Lake of the Isles. Lowry Hill is basically part of, or at least directly next to, what is colloquially known as Uptown. Uptown is a much smaller area on the map, and like technically than people give it credit for. People call a much larger swath of area Uptown. But yeah, just outside, basically right on that Hennepin Avenue, is where people would really start to call that Uptown. Uptown made the list for most walkable areas in the Twin Cities, and I actually think it's probably the most walkable area, with North Loop being right up there with that. And North Loop is maybe encroaching on it as well, as North Loop gets more and more established, which has been happening for probably a couple decades now. In Lowry Hill, you're only about 10 minutes to downtown Minneapolis. It's a piece of cake, like really all back roads, like none of it is highway if you want to get into downtown. And yeah, I take that route very often, as I live pretty much one or two neighborhoods over from Lowry Hill. I take those same routes over and over again, and I think they're just so easy to navigate and generally pretty easy to avoid any kind of traffic. You're probably about 15 to 25 minutes from the MSP airport, and maybe the same distance or so to, say, downtown St. Paul. The traditional public schools that serve the Lowry Hill neighborhood are just so-so, to be honest. There's Kenwood Elementary, which is actually probably ranks the highest out of all of them at an A-. It actually is a pretty beloved elementary school and has certain programs like special ed and arts programs that it's particularly renowned for. But then you have Ann Wanton Middle School, which gets a C, and North High School, which gets a C-. That said, there are a ton of magnet schools and charter schools within Minneapolis, and if you don't know, Minnesota was the first state to pass a charter school law, which basically allowed charter schools to exist, and we have quite a few of them that are held in very, very high regard around the Twin Cities. So if those public schools aren't particularly attractive to you, but you like the idea of living here, then maybe those are worth considering. And of course, there are some unbelievable private schools very, very nearby, including the Blake School, Breck, and honestly, a ton of others. The housing stock in Lowry Hill is genuinely some of my favorite in all of the Twin Cities. I think there are some of the most stunningly beautiful old traditional homes in the Lowry Hill neighborhood, and there's only a couple places that compete with this sort of level of grandiosity while also being this old. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the For Fans of section at the end, what those places might be. But the median sale price for housing here is $485,000. That's including condos and townhomes and the like. The truth is, to get a single family home, mostly in Lowry Hill, you're probably spending $800,000 or more. And when I say that the homes here are impressive, for one, any home on Lake of the Isles is going to be one of the coolest homes in the Twin Cities. But you can get several blocks into this neighborhood. In fact, you can get all the way up to Hennepin, all the way to the opposite edge of the neighborhood. And you're still going to see some just incredible examples of all sorts of different architecture, including Victorian, of course, Craftsman, Colonial Revival, Tudor, Prairie style homes and the like, but really nothing post-war and newer. This neighborhood is much older than that, and it must have a long history of affluence for these old homes to still be standing and still be so stately. The most affordable listing on the market right now is $110,000 condo, probably basement condo, if I'm being honest. And the most expensive listing right now is $3.9 million. There's actually a house right here that is on the market that is incredible, like truly dream house with a view of Lake of the Isles, and you know, you walk out your front door and your whole neighborhood is a park. But I'm gonna keep showing you around. Let's go for a ride. All right, so right now I'm at Logan Avenue right here, Summit Avenue right there, not Summit Avenue in St. Paul. That's kind of obvious, but a lot of people go, oh, Summit, I've heard of that. This is a different Summit, although still quite lovely. Logan is truly a beautiful street, and it abuts to Kenwood Park. So kind of again, right behind the camera is Kenwood Park. You'll see it in the B-roll. It's a beautiful park space. Tons and tons of like older growth trees. It is basically contiguous to Lake of the Isles, so I tend to think of them all kind of as one big park, but just tons of beautiful green space, tennis courts, baseball diamond, and I believe a basketball court as well. I don't know, actually, don't quote me on that. But right down kind of at the end of Logan here is basically where Lake of the Isles starts, the very, very northern tip of Lake of the Isles. And it's such a beautiful sort of intersection of all of these things. But I want to talk through the pros and cons of living in Lowry Hill as I see them. And pro, to me, it's overwhelming. I think it's mostly pros here. And there are some cons, though, that are probably substantial enough that some people wouldn't choose it, right? So pro number one for me is the housing stock. I think there's so many houses here that are truly in that like aspirational house, right? Like where you're like, this is the house that I've dreamt about my entire life. Those exist here, right? And there's only so many places in the Twin Cities metro where you could get an older aspirational style house. And when I mean aspirational, I'm talking like a house with a carriage home, right, attached, a house with a porte cochere, houses built by notable architects from the 1900s to the 1930s, right, like truly aspirational style homes. Then the next pro, it's probably obvious because of how much time I've spent in these places, but the park access in Lowry Hill is incredible. Kenwood Park, one of my favorite parks. Like, as far as just parks, no lake attached, Kenwood Park is unbelievable. Then you have Lake of the Isles, maybe my favorite lake in Minneapolis. I get to drive it a lot because of where I live. Feel very lucky. I feel very lucky to be able to drive by that almost every single day because it's beautiful. I feel very lucky to drive by that because it's truly just beautiful. Another pro for me would be easy access to the likes of Uptown. So Uptown has a ton of restaurants. It's a little bit under construction right now. It's not necessarily like at its best that it's ever been, Uptown in general. It's sort of seeing some transformation right now. That said, I live right by it. I'm there all the time, right? I drive through Uptown a lot. I go to Uptown for all sorts of things. Uptown is an asset if you live here. But then you also have really, really good access to downtown Minneapolis with, again, like no highway at all. To me, that's a win. Our office is just across the river from downtown. I drive through downtown and North Loop like pretty much every day coming from this area, and to be that close to that is really something very, very important to me, and I know that a lot of the people who live here, that is of massive importance to them as well. Along with the beautiful park space and the lakes, I should have tied in, or well, here I am tying it in, basically unbelievable access to biking paths, walking paths, right? You are fundamentally connected to what's called the Grand Round Scenic Bikeway. Once you're on Lake of the Isles, that's part of it. And you could hop onto the path around Lake of the Isles and be on protected bike path all the way to Minnehaha Falls, all the way to downtown, all the way to basically Robbinsdale, right? The connectivity is amazing. It's one of the things that makes living in Minnesota awesome, but if you can have this kind of access to it, I think that takes it to another level. One thing that sort of works in tandem to the old homes in the park space is the tree-lined streets. You have all of these really, really beautiful streets and full of beautiful homes, but there's just sort of a park-like quality to the whole neighborhood. I'm obviously on the park right now, but a few blocks in that way, it's still the most beautiful neighborhood and a place that you would feel truly delighted to walk around. This goes along with the beautiful homes, but you have really good lot sizes for being in the cities here, right? Again, these are old homes, sort of like really early days of the Twin Cities becoming what it was. And so the lot sizes were pretty dang good. So you have really large homes, most of them. Yeah, actually most, not just some of them, most of them are quite large. And ample lot sizes. Lot sizes tended to get a little bit smaller as time progressed, and that adds to the sort of park-like quality of the neighborhood, is that things are just a little bit more spread out, and yeah, really, really something cool. As far as cons are concerned, I already said it, I think the pros overweigh the cons for, at least for what I want out of life at the moment. But a lot of the people that we help, in particular, are looking for very good schools, right? And I can't really say what is good for a person and what is not good for a person. But statistically, the schools, compared to the other schools that are potentially available in neighborhoods kind of like this, the public schools maybe suffer a little bit. That said, a lot of people from other places think of charter schools and magnet schools as being like problem schools. In the Twin Cities, that's not necessarily the case. A lot of the charter schools and magnet schools are very specialized schools that excel in, one or two elements. So if you really like the idea of everything that you're seeing here, but public schools are really important to you, I would implore you to look into the charter and magnet school options and see if that could be a good fit for you. And that said, plenty of the people who live here use the public schools, and you'll hear differing opinions and things like that. I'm going off the stats of niche.com, right? A con for some people would be the highway noise. We're pretty close to I-94 and I-394. I can actually hear a bit of highway hum in the background, because really it's not too far that way to where you have I-394 kind of weaving under it. This part of the city is up pretty high, so you're buffered from it a little bit, right? To where the highway sits pretty far under, from a topographic standpoint, under the neighborhood. And at sort of the southeastern edge of the neighborhood, you have houses that are kind of on a bluff almost, overlooking highway, overlooking, rest of the city and suburbs and things like that. I said it earlier, the houses here are pretty expensive, so I gotta chalk that up as a con. It's more expensive than the median sale price of the rest of the metro, but if you look at the houses, any listing that you see online of a house in the Lowry Hill neighborhood, you'll go, yeah, that probably ought to be more expensive than the median, right? Because they're all so stunning. For sure, another con for some people will be the proximity to Uptown. Uptown is not for everybody, right? There's kind of a liveliness, a little bit of a hubbub, a little bit too much action for some people. And so if that's you, then maybe you'll find this place is a little bit too hectic, or maybe you'll find Hennepin in general is a bit too hectic. And I think that's perfectly reasonable, but some of the people we help would love to be that close to Hennepin. Other people really would not, right? So up to you how you think about that overall. And now if there are things that you like about Lowry Hill, but maybe it doesn't check all the boxes, next I'm gonna talk about some places that you might wanna consider if you are attracted to this and just want some other options. Let's go for a drive. Right behind me now is Mount Curve Boulevard, which is home to some of the most, impressive homes in all of Minneapolis. Mount Curve, like the name implies, curves and goes upward, right? It changes in elevation. And this is sort of the edge of the neighborhood, and also it overlooks a pretty impressive landscape. It also overlooks some highway, so that's not necessarily the coolest aspect of it, but for sure, a house with a view in Minneapolis. There's not that many places where that can exist, so this is one of them. And I gotta assume there wasn't a highway there when they were built, unless there are things that I don't know about the world. So they were probably had just unbelievable views, and so they were built really impressively. So while now the view has changed, and it's more suburban almost, and a little bit more highway, the houses themselves are unreal, right? It has a very unique quality to these houses, but the reality is it shows up over and over again in this neighborhood. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that I have a section that I like to call the For Fans of section, which is to say that if you like what you see here, maybe here are some other places that you might want to consider. Before I do, if you're interested in working with us, we would love to help you. Relocations, helping people find their place in the Twin Cities is what we specialize in. It's what we are passionate about. It's what we spend all of our time trying to solve problems for. You'll see this channel hopefully as an asset. We have a podcast channel, we have a schools channel, and then there's us, right? And our understanding of these neighborhoods and of what places might be of interest to y'all, and then combine that with our understanding of the relocation process and what makes that unique and what are certain pressures that y'all might have. This might be a very stressful situation for you, a very stressful process for you, but this is what we do every single day. You can go to our website, tothetwincities.com. We have a contact form there that you can fill out in like 30 seconds or less. You reach out to us, we'll get back in touch, we'll set up a time to chat, and then we'll just, get the show on the road. And I promise you at the end of that call, you will feel much more certain about how this process is going to go, how it's going to work, and hopefully that puts you at ease a little bit. Let's talk for Lowry Hill. And if you're talking Lowry Hill, you're speaking my language. Okay, a few places that come to mind. A lot of them are nearby, and that's not just me being like, oh, they're close, they're similar. They're nearby and they're similar because they were built at similar times. They were developed at similar times. And so a lot of the housing stock, a lot of the styles of lots and roads and the age of the trees and that stuff becomes similar, right? There are some places in St. Paul that come to mind that I'm going to talk about after this. But immediately next door to Lowry Hill is the Kenwood neighborhood. The Kenwood neighborhood is absolutely stunning and filled with beautiful houses, including the Mary Tyler Moore house, which is pretty cool. But it has so much in common geographically, similar access to the city, similar access to park spaces, Lake of the Isles, things like that. But I would say it's a little bit more neighborhoody. It's a little bit more secured from some of the hubbub, right? Some of the action of the likes of Uptown and Hennepin Avenue, and even Franklin Avenue and I-94, right? It's sort of tucked back behind a few lakes, and that makes it feel super, super quaint and super neighborhood. What it doesn't have that Lowry Hill has is, for one, typically the houses are maybe a little bit less stately, a little less large, but still beautiful, very nicely sized homes, right? But maybe less historical mansion and more just like historical, beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood. And then I think the biggest differentiator is that you are more removed from the hubbub of Uptown, of Hennepin, right? So that like sort of energy, or that like, you know, I don't know, almost chaotic element that can happen of like a really happening, walkable, like urban area, like that happens on Hennepin. You don't have any of that, and there's basically no commercial space in Kenwood. We have a virtual tour on Kenwood, and there's literally one commercial space. There's actually a restaurant called the Kenwood, which is really good, so you should go there for sure. But that's pretty much it. And then another neighborhood with maybe a similar soul, maybe a cousin to Lowry Hill, is Lowry Hill East, as the name obviously implies. You're going to find a lot of rentals there, right? So there's a decent rental rate here, somewhere around 50% in Lowry Hill. I would say it's going to be even higher in Lowry Hill East. That is very much kind of in that area that people would be calling Uptown, right? And so it's pretty renter heavy, a lot of multifamily homes, a lot more action in general, and really less of the cozy kind of neighborhoody natural elements that you find here. But if you're leaning into sort of the more, I don't know, active, sort of like vibrant nightlife-y type thing, then Lowry Hill East would be probably of interest. Another that comes to mind, which is just beyond that, is the Whittier neighborhood. And Whittier actually really is a decent comp in terms of the housing stock. Some of the coolest houses in Minneapolis are in the Whittier neighborhood. It's early, it's really early days to Minneapolis being developed, especially the houses. So some of the oldest homes in Minneapolis proper are in Whittier, and there's some true stunners. We've helped people end up there, and specifically somebody who was looking for a pretty architecturally, you know, interesting, architecturally significant home, and they found one in Whittier. Then two neighborhoods I'm just gonna throw out there that I think are, I don't know, close enough. They have enough in common that I think they're worth mentioning. Cedar Isles Dean, that's a neighborhood that I particularly love, but it's really residential, full of a lot of really beautiful homes, and it is adjacent to Lake of the Isles, Cedar Lake, and basically Benema as well. And then lastly, in Minneapolis, you have the neighborhood Linden Hills. I think Linden Hills and Kenwood are some of the closest comps, but Linden Hills is almost like a mix between Kenwood and Lowry Hill, where it has really great little like downtown cores, right? Kind of like a villagey feel, whereas Kenwood doesn't, right? And Lowry Hill has kind of a vibrant sort of urban aspect to it. So somewhere in between there is Linden Hills. And then in St. Paul, I think maybe one of the best comps for the Lowry Hill neighborhood in terms of architectural significance, beautiful homes, you know, houses with portico shares, houses with carriage houses, houses with 3 decks on them, right? Then we're talking Summit Hill and Ramsey Hill, which are basically, I'm gonna tie into one. Those are unbelievable neighborhoods with just some of the most stunning homes in them. I'm a huge fan of those neighborhoods, and I think it's probably one of the most, I don't know, special places in all of the Twin Cities. That's all I got for this video. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.